Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to today's webinar about how to reach customers on the world's largest B2B e-marketplace, Alibaba.com, brought to you by the Institute of Export and International Trade with the support of WorldFirst. My name is William Barnes-Gray. I'm the Senior Content Editor at the Institute, and I will be your host for this afternoon. Next slide, please. Thank you. So here you'll see we have a lot to cover today. To begin with, we will hear from Jack Peters from Alibaba.com, who will be talking about the opportunities that are on the platform for UK traders. Jack has been a business director with Alibaba since 2016 and has vast experience in the e-commerce and retail sectors, as you can see on the slide. We'll then hear from Charles Harrison from WorldFirst about some of the considerations traders need to make to ensure they are paid for online transactions and to ensure they can collect this payment in the most appropriate currency. Charles has a great understanding of how companies set themselves up to make the most of e-commerce, so we're really looking forward to hearing from him. And finally, we'll be hearing from Hamish Mackay, a trade and customs specialist team lead at the Institute of Export and International Trade, who will be guiding us through some of the customs and trade considerations e-commerce firms should be making. Each presentation today will be followed by a brief Q&A on the topics covered, and you'll be able to read more about our great panel of speakers when you share a PDF of the slide pack shortly after this webinar finishes. Next slide, please. Before we get into the presentations, though, we're going to run a quick poll to find out a little bit more about you, our audience. So I'm going to launch that now. And here we are asking you whether you have used Alibaba before to buy or sell products. Options are yes, no, or not sure. While you're answering that, just a couple of quick housekeeping notes from me. Firstly, you can contact me with any comments or questions using the question panel on the control window to the right-hand side of your screen. We hope to get to a number of your questions during the Q&As today, so please note we cannot guarantee that we will get to every single question in the allocated time. A quick tip though, if your questions are concise and easy for me to read, I am more likely to read them. Secondly, as already noted, you will receive access to today's slide pack, as well as a recording of a webinar in a follow-up email we will be sending over the next day or so. So please do try to listen in as carefully as you can to today's presentations. Right, I'm going to give you a couple more seconds to answer that poll. And so 3, 2, 1. I'm going to share the results. So thank you everyone for answering, and glad to see some certainty, but not sure there was just in case. But 71% of you haven't used Alibaba before, 29% of you have. So hopefully, whether you used it or not, this will be informative as a webinar for you. But enough of me. Thank you everyone for answering that poll. Very much appreciated, of course. And on the next slide, it's my pleasure to bring on Jack Peters from Alibaba. Hi, Jack. How are you? Any surprises with that poll response there?
Well, it's good to see that there is already some traction on the Alibaba.com platform, but I can also see that there's still a world to win, and maybe that today can be a start of that. So I'd like to contribute with my story, and hopefully this picture will change after my presentation.
Fantastic. Thanks, Jack. Over to you.
Yeah. So if you go to the next slide, then I can start my presentation. And before going to Alibaba, I would like to start with what we see in the market, because you're probably all aware of that. During the pandemic, we had to change the ways we interact in the business. Of course, we are all used to in-person contacts and traditional contacts. But today also this webinar is an example of that. We are also getting used to Zooms and team meetings and webinars, which are remote human interactions, as they call it. But we also started to use digital self-serve. So we started to buy actually and sell on websites in B2B. And so there is a changing dynamics, which we think this is here to stay. And this is also what the research has showed us. But if you're still considering to go into B2B, then consider that 1/3 of the potential buyers are using this channel. So you're erasing out 1/3 of your potential chances by not being digitally savvy. So if you go to the next slide, then you can also see that the appreciation for e-commerce is quite big. E-commerce has become the most effective channel for business people to do their business. And it also struck me a little bit that it is even more effective than in person and in video conferencing. But what we learned from this is that it is not and or, but the two slides show us that it's and. So you have to add all the channels and all the possibilities available. So if you go to the next slide, then we come to our mission, the mission of Alibaba and Alibaba.com, and that is to make it easy to do business anywhere. We firmly believe that globalization is key to do business in the future. And we also think that is not only for big companies, not only for corporates, but especially also for SMEs. So it is our mission to help SMEs to do business anywhere. Whether this is in B2C or in B2B, that doesn't make too much difference for us. Our platform is designed to make it easy to do business anywhere. For this, we use the technique. For this, they call us also a tech company. But in essence, we're a trading company. If you go to the next slide. And this trading we do with a so-called ecosystem. Now this might, if on a first glance, look a little bit complicated, and maybe it is, because we have 40 business units. We have a lot of services to help those businesses thrive their business. But what you have to take from this picture is, first of all, that most of our business is in China. Indeed, that is true. Maybe about 90% of our business is China commerce. But there's also an international commercial part. And you see that on the second of the left-hand side and the upper-hand side. We have two exporting parts, two exporting businesses who work globally, so worldwide. That is in B2C, AliExpress, this you might know, but also Lazada in Indonesia, Trendyol in Turkey, and Daraz in Pakistan. And for today, it's very important to understand Alibaba.com, because Alibaba.com is our B2B exporting platform, not only to China, especially not to China, but to the rest of the world. So it's a real international commerce. Yes, next slide, please. So if you then zoom into Alibaba.com, there's three things you need to know. We have 26 million active buyers worldwide. We have about 340,000 daily product inquiries, averagely. And we have more than 100,000 SMEs actively selling on our platform. And this is the proof that our platform is very suitable for smaller and medium-sized enterprises to do their business globally. We go to the next slide. Then the question is, who is buying what and where are they buying? And here's the proof also of our platform B2B, our B2B platform not being directed to China, or it is not about China. It is about exporting to other markets worldwide. And the number one market is the United States. And second is India. You can see a lot of large countries there. And even you can see the UK as the 6th country. So if you would like to engage with potential buyers or sellers in your home country, the United Kingdom, the 6th largest country for buyer origin is the UK. And also you see the EU countries like Italy, France, Germany in the top 20. So it is really a global market here. The top 10 categories for the buyer's interest is by far number one is food and beverage. And for every seller, there's 15 potential buyers on the platform. So you could say there is small mismatch on the food and beverage market on the platform, and this we try to solve, of course, by adding sellers from the food and beverage field. But also agriculture is very important, and you have a good agriculture as well. So you have to talk about, to think about wheat, corn, flowers, so those kind of products in agriculture. And then you can pick your choice: beauty, personal care, apparel. A lot of products that can be produced on a private label or OEM are very suitable, or ingredients are very suitable to be put on Alibaba.com for exposure. Okay, the next slide. So why work with Alibaba.com? So how does it work? So apart from the 26 million buyers, which I told, we have exposure in 190 countries. So basically that is worldwide. Again, it's not about China. Of course, this is part of it, but most of the business is done outside of China globally. It has a clear affordable cost. So we take only a flat fee per year, which goes up to the maximum of $6,000. And then even there's 3,000 advertising costs included. We have no tech integration. I think this is very important, because you might think that, especially as an SME, if you need to involve your IT, it becomes quite complicated normally. But in this case, Alibaba.com is a standalone tool, which you can use as a standalone tool. You can upload your information, your products, but you don't need to integrate it in the IT of your company. Of course, there's a high demand for UK products because of their quality, because of the heritage in the UK, because of the regulatory demands, the certifications, etc. You see that there's a lot of traction on UK products. It is a truly B2B platform, so there's no possibility for end users to buy. Of course, this you can control a little bit yourself as a company with your MOQs, so you could put MOQs there. Also, it is there's not a specific price mentioned. Normally, it's a price range you mention, and that has to do with the way we work, because that's the next point: full control. You are in full control of your business, which means that the business itself is not done on the platform. It is not a buying and a selling platform. Nobody can put an order in your web shop. A potential buyer can only express his interest in your products or your product range and get into contact with you. And once you have contact with that potential buyer, you take them offline and you make an appointment with them, or you go further discussion on email or whatever means of communication you like, but that is up to you. You also use your normal conditions, like your normal warehousing conditions, your normal delivery conditions, your normal commercial organization, so you don't need to build a certain organization to be active on Alibaba.com. We don't take commission, and I was very surprised by that as well, because nearly all business units take commission. We don't. We just work, what I said before, with a flat fee, which makes us very interesting against other platforms who do take commission. Of course, you have a full ownership of your data, so you can do your own customer analytics, and we also organize online events where you have access to. So this is the picture of Alibaba.com. Again, not so complicated to do, and so very suitable for also for smaller and medium-sized enterprises. Next sheet. So there's two ways to engage with potential buyers. First one is you can open up your shop. So you create your own online B2B store, and there you can differentiate yourself from the competition with a full store dedicated to your products. You can put your heritage in, your assortment, or whatever assortment or part of assortment you like. your capacities, your capabilities. So that is all what you can do in your own store. The upload of the products is quite easy. You don't need design skills. Again, it's the standalone tool. You fill it with data you already have from your existing web shop or maybe from your product catalog, and you can just upload the products. Again, it's maybe not necessary to put all the products there because the single product is not bought on your website. But of course, it's best to give best flavor of what you can offer to a potential buyer in your shop. And then you can connect with potential buyers and build a relationship. Again, this you do outside of the scope of Alibaba.com. Next. The second possibility is a request for quotation tool. So there's a lot of buyers who are interested in engaging with potential sellers who might be of interest for them. For example, a retailer could ask for a private label in food supplements or in health supplements, or somebody might say, I need ingredients for, let's say, a bulk powder product, an energy drink or an energy powder. So they can put that request on the website. And if you have your search words optimized, you can find those requests and you can reach out to those potential buyers, get in touch with them and ask them what they exactly want, and maybe you can help them very specifically, maybe a specialized product or you have already a ready-made product for them. Then you can quote to them, you can negotiate with them, and you can make a deal. So that is what we call the proactive tool, and your web shop is the reactive tool. And basically that is all there is to say to it, to Alibaba.com. So it doesn't sound maybe too complicated. It is also not that complicated, but it is an option which not many companies are aware of. Not many companies know how they should operate that and if they could do that. Now maybe you get at least a flavor that it is also open for companies from the UK. It is open for smaller and medium-sized enterprises. So it's up to you to consider this and maybe get active in that part of the business. So thank you, William. That will be it.
Thank you, Jack. That was really interesting. It's a far more global platform than I realised, I have to say. So that's a really interesting presentation. Thank you so much for presenting. I'm just going to do a quick poll and then we'll get into some questions. So we are here asking, what are the main challenges you face trading internationally online? The options there being reaching customers, translation, getting paid, logistics, and other. So yeah, once again, thank you, Jack, for the presentation. We've had a few questions, but I'll start with one for myself, if I may. You touched on it at the start of the presentation, but there's been this widely reported boom in e-commerce during the pandemic. Do you see this rise continuing in a post-pandemic new normal world?
Yes, so it's a good question. I think we've seen on the first slides that we've seen a move towards the digital self-serve and remote interactions, and we believe that this is here to stay, and that will even increase, especially in the B2B market, because the B2B market is not a very matured market yet. You could also see in the poll only 29% uses it at the moment, and a lot of companies don't. So in B2C, of course, this is already more or less done. In B2B, it will evolve in the next years. So we think that will be much more important, and that it should be part of your business approach in general. And this is also what we saw in the initial slides. It's 1/3, 1/3, 1/3.
Thanks, Jack. Just give people a few more seconds to answer that poll. So we'll move on to a question from Sylvan, who's asked, I have a really small team and I am worried about the time required to set up and manage a store. What advice would you give to Sylvain? Jack?
Yeah, good question. So there's two options to get on the platform. So either you can do that with your own organization. That means you have an own e-commerce organization or a marketing organization or even IT department who could build and operate the store. But there are also service companies who can do that for you. They're not too expensive. They also take a flat fee on a year, and they can open up your store. They can operate it for you. They can do the search word optimization for you, etc., and the advertising, and they can keep you in the loop on what's happening in that store. So that is possible. I must say that is not an Alibaba company, so it's independent service companies who are in connection with Alibaba, so we know them. We value them also on their expertise and on their performance. So they're good companies, and that is a possibility also to do.
Thanks, Jack. I'm just going to quickly share the result of the poll. So it's going to share that result. So 37% of you have said reaching customers is the main challenge. The same amount have said logistics, and then 12% of you getting paid. So hopefully we've covered a little bit just then about the ways you can reach customers, but we'll be coming on to getting paid and logistics shortly. Only 3% of you translation. And a nice comment just come in from Nikki, who says she totally agrees the online approach is definitely booming as we all get used to digital. I tend to agree as well, Nikki. And Nikki's asked if we will be sharing a copy of the slides. Yes, we will be sharing the slide pack and the recording after the webinar, so keep an eye out for an email from us. As you'll see on the next slide, we'll be doing just a few more questions in this part of the webinar. So Harry has asked, how long does it take after deciding to join the platform to become operational?
Yeah, that depends a little bit on your internal organization and the availability of data and product pictures and descriptions. But suppose you have an own web shop already and you have that data already, so you have good pictures and you have a good view on what you want to put as content into your web shop. It might take up to 2 weeks. And that means also it's not that complicated, because what you can do in 2 weeks, it should not be so complicated. But again, it requires that you have already the content available to upload in the store.
And that is very much incumbent on Harry's company. But thank you, Jack. Thank you, Jack, Harry, for the question. We've had an interesting question from Easter, and it comes back to the point you were saying earlier. So Easter's asked, how does Alibaba manage the export or food and beverages sold on the platform? I mean, presumably, as you say, Jack, it's the transactions arranged, but it's up to the exporter to then arrange for the actual export itself.
We don't. So we're not exporting, so we don't buy the goods. Whereas Alibaba.com is only the platform. It's the tool to connect to potential buyers, or to connect sellers and buyers, if you like. And then it's up to the company itself. So it is up to your organization and your organization standards on exporting. So if you're not used to sell to North America, you can find on Alibaba.com potential buyers from North America, maybe, but it's up to your organization to find out how, and that from the logistics and from the export. So it's really an offline business.
I think it's a really important point to clarify. So thank you, Jack. And obviously, when it comes to the export part, Hamish will be covering a little bit of that later, and some of the support the Institute provides. We'll do one more question on this part of the webinar, and hopefully we'll have time for more for Jack later. But it's a question from Jackie, and again, you've touched on it already, but it's an important point. So Jackie says, Alibaba is to a great extent associated with the Chinese market. but there appear to be buyers on the platform from all over the world. So to what extent should UK businesses be looking at Alibaba as a platform for a global market rather than just a way into the Chinese market?
Yeah, that's a good question, but I think that depends on the view and the strategy of each organization. So there are organizations who might want to limit their export to certain regions in the world. That's also possible, by the way, on Alibaba.com. But that's a fully owned decision, a company's decision, as is a decision to go to China. And the latter I would not take randomly, because the Chinese market is a highly competitive market. I would say Alibaba.com is a tool to go to China, but it's not the tool to go to China, because it's, again, what I said, it is not a go to China opportunity, Alibaba.com. And people start to mix it up with Tmall and Tmall Classic and Tmall Global in B2C. That is really in B2C exporting to China. And I would be rather looking at those opportunities if you want to go to China and to organize it properly, including a little bit of wholesale, than looking at Alibaba.com for the
Thanks,
Chinese
Jack.
market.
That's a really important point. Also about the complexity and size of the Chinese market. It's lots of channels, lots of regions, lots of cultures you have to understand.
We can also consult on that. So if you want to go to China, but that is a little bit outside of the scope of this meeting.
Thanks, Jack. But that's been really useful. So thank you for the answers, and I hope everyone has found that useful. But we move on to the next slide. Let's get going with the next part of the webinar. So it was 12% of you said getting paid was the main issue with e-commerce for you, but I'm sure that's the main issue. I'm sure payment is sort of the main part of all of this. So really glad to welcome on Charles from WorldFirst, who's going to present the next part of the webinar. Over to you, Charles.
Thank you, William, for that introduction. As William said, I'm Charles Harrison, Senior Relationship Manager at WorldFirst. Following Jack's introduction into the e-commerce marketplace and Alibaba, I'm going to explore how businesses, once successful in striking up these new sales contracts, can look to facilitate the transfer and collection of funds for these goods, the potential challenges they might come up against, and then some operational solutions that we can use to address these. Just as a quick introduction to WorldFirst, who we are as a business and why we're able to offer credible support in this area. WorldFirst were established in 2004 in London, simply with the goal of making it easier for businesses to send and receive international payments. Regulated by the FCA, WorldFirst have sent billions of pounds in FX payments since then, and has now got, I think, 7 offices located around the world. Specifically, since 2010, we've focused heavily on the e-commerce space, helping businesses sell online on marketplaces such as Alibaba, and are now in a position to be able to help SMEs manage all aspects of their currency exposure when selling to international markets or paying suppliers abroad. So to start, I wanted to focus on the challenges that businesses face, and the main challenges online sellers have in terms of international payments and collections can really be categorized into cost, risk, and then the general functionality of their systems. In terms of cost, there's plenty of unforeseen costs that occur when doing business internationally. You can look at conversion costs, payment costs, banking fees, and if these aren't addressed, you can start to lose profitability of sales quite quickly. And again, as alluded to by Jack in his presentation, businesses collecting funds from buyers on the Alibaba platform need to arrange for these payments collections to happen offline, outside of Alibaba. This means that the seller effectively needs to set up their own collection system to minimize these costs. For some businesses, when paying an overseas buyer, or when an overseas buyer pays in foreign currency, it will arrive in the seller's account in a pound-denominated account. So when these funds land, they can be subject to high conversion costs and additional fees before they can then be reconciled as actual sales profits. In terms of risk, the currency market is highly volatile, typically moving around 10 to 15% a year. it's really easy to see how agreed sales with overseas buyers can be impacted heavily by market fluctuations. If you agree a sale with a buyer, you don't expect to collect the funds for 30 days. There's a large window there for fluctuations to impact the overall profitability of that sale. So getting the right support around the risks of currency volatility is vital, really, to having a concrete business strategy and to simply protect your profit margins. And then thirdly, in terms of systems being fit for purpose, many businesses that have a need to pay suppliers overseas as well as selling their goods abroad, so they may be paying double conversions if they haven't set up their banking systems correctly. So that first conversion of the funds as they arrive, so once they've paid for a sale, but also the second conversion on the same funds as they go out to pay their overseas suppliers. Without the correct infrastructure, businesses again can be seeing profits eroded simply by not having the right setup to facilitate doing that international business. It's also the case that businesses, when selling in an overseas jurisdiction, will require a local currency account in which to collect proceeds from their sales. It can be hugely time consuming and costly to go and physically set up these accounts in the relevant countries' jurisdictions, especially for businesses that don't have a strong physical presence in that region already. So simply, it's easy to see, alongside costs, risks, and cross-border payments, the processes these payments and collections are made through also needs to be fit for purpose for that business. So quite simply, what are the solutions to these problems? WorldFirst offers two account functionalities. You have, as on this slide, you have a payments account and our collections account. The payments account allows businesses to buy currency to facilitate payments to suppliers overseas. So for example, you're buying stock from the US and you need to send dollars. The payments account allows you to do this in a very cost-effective way, but it also allows you to fix the rate of exchange by taking out forward contracts. This is simply when a business can lock in a rate of exchange for a future payment they wish to make, minimizing the impact of currency price fluctuations. Again, effectively just locking in the profits they've made from that sale. Can we go on to the next slide, please? The second solution is the collections account. So this was built specifically with the e-commerce business in mind to help support the financial operations of online sellers. Once the initial account has been activated, businesses are able to offer different currency accounts in 10 different major currencies, which will allow them to receive funds made from overseas buyers straight into that local account. This process can be done instantaneously without the cost and time expense of having to go and open multiple physical accounts. A further benefit of using the local collections account is that it allows the business's separate currency accounts to all be viewed and managed through one centralized dashboard. Many businesses will recognize the effort of switching between platforms and accounts when trying to get just a general overview of their balances. So bringing this all into all one platform simplifies the process. The product is also integrated into accounting software like Xero, which helps streamline this process for businesses even further. For businesses that receive sales in overseas currencies, but also pay suppliers in that same currency, they're able to also hold these funds on account. So again, this reduces the need for those double conversions, as I talked about earlier, as well as reducing other associated costs. Can we go to the next slide, please? So one particular barrier that businesses can come up against when looking to expand into new territories is weighing up and justifying the cost of entering that new market. So as already mentioned, the cost of setting up their infrastructure to be able to operate, but also the cost of attracting sales. WorldFirst is currently offering a rebate process to businesses that sign up to Alibaba and then go on to use the WorldFirst for their payments. So through offering local currency accounts which can be opened free of charge and offering a rebate for the cost of entering the marketplace, businesses are able to feel more confident about deciding to take that step into new markets. Next slide, please. So I suppose to summarize, opening up in new markets can be an excellent opportunity for businesses to grow their global sales channels. entering these markets comes with challenges, potential payment costs, currency volatility, and building the right infrastructure for their needs. By working alongside marketplaces such as Alibaba, WorldFirst is able to support businesses who are looking, to either improve their current process or to then start selling into these new regions overseas. If anyone has any questions, I'd be delighted to answer them. I think if we go to the next slide, there'll be some contact details on that. Yeah, that's all from me. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Charles. And we'll have this slide on for a couple of seconds here, but we'll also have it on at the end as well, just so people get a chance to take a note. So I'll do a question with this slide open first. So Charles, you've spoken of the importance of businesses finding cost-effective ways to convert payments made in foreign currencies into your own currency. What are the risks for businesses if they don't have a proper approach in place for this?
I think the risks are that having the wrong system will end up costing you money and a lot of time. Money because having potentially poor conversion rates, unexpected fees, losses from volatility, that there will all be a material impact in terms of the finances of the business, and time because you can go and spend a lot of time getting the wrong process set up, and having to then correct that and readdress that so that the correct process is just a waste of people's time within the business. And so thinking about how your payment collection facilities can help you grow as a business is really important, even if it's not a massive part of the business now.
Thanks, Charles. So if we move to the next slide, we'll just do a poll while asking another couple of questions. So here we're asking if you would like if you'd like to be contacted by WorldFirst, if you require any more information about the support they're providing to e-commerce traders. So hopefully a great opportunity there for anyone out there who's new to e-commerce or are very much kind of finding their feet with currencies as well. So I'll leave that open while we ask a couple more questions. So this is a question we've just had in from Nick. It's a good question. Aside from currencies, what are the other major risks around payments for firms completing transactions online using e-commerce platforms?
Yes, even with same currency or domestic payments, again, going back to having that right system in place in order to save you from wasting time is hugely important. If the setup is incorrect, you're wasting your two precious resources in the business in cash and time. So most of these accounts that businesses will set up when they're dealing domestically really aren't built for businesses to grow and expand, and businesses can outgrow these, especially when they start to look into international business. So again, this is why even before you start the journey of exporting, if you don't already, getting this and getting oversight of the right system before you do is really important.
Thanks, Charles. And we had a question in from Tanya, who's asked, do you also support Indian sellers? So I guess to broaden that question, is your services largely for UK companies, or is it a global service as well?
So the product in terms of the collections account is the 10 major currencies, but in terms of supporting a wider range of currencies and a more global side, then yeah, absolutely. The payments account is certainly set up to support businesses in other jurisdictions outside the 10 of the collections account.
Thanks, Jack. And so next slide, we'll see I think we've got a minute left for questions. So just see if we've got any more regarding payments or currencies. I mean, one thing which pops to my mind is a bit of a curveball, Jack, Charles, so shoot me down if you don't want to answer it. But we've obviously heard a lot about cryptocurrencies as well. I mean, is that anything which comes into your sphere at all? Is that anything which interrelates at all with e-commerce platforms?
I think it's something that is people are getting quite excited by. I think that in terms of it becoming an active part of business in the near future, I'd be a bit, because banks tend to be quite hesitant of it. I can see that it not playing a massive role for UK businesses in the near term. But I mean, who knows where that rabbit hole particularly will take us in the future.
It's fascinating, it really is. But conscious of time, so thank you, Charles. That was really useful. Thank you for covering the kind of the payments aspect. And it is now my delight to, on the next slide, bring on Hamish to talk about the trade and customs aspects. So over to you, Hamish.
Thanks, Will. Just introduce myself again. Hamish Mackay. I'm a team lead with the Institute of Export and International Trade, and I'm part of the Academy. Next slide, please. So there's a number of areas that we need to look at when we're deciding when we're moving goods. And one of the first things you need to look at is and understand is what is your product. Know your product. The first thing is commodity code. The commodity code is a number that is used by customs authorities to recognize what the goods are, and it determines what the duty rate is on those goods. It also shows whether there's any preferential trade agreement or anything, depending on where you're moving your goods to and from. And it's required for all customs declarations. You also need a commodity code to be able to determine your origin status. And the origin of your product is effectively the, it's like knowing, you know, where it was born, if you like. So origin is specifically required, for instance, trade between the UK and the EU. They need to know that it's a UK origin product to be able to make use of zero duty when moving goods between Great Britain and the EU, because we have a preferential agreement between ourselves and the EU. Likewise, there are trade agreements with many other parts of the country, of the world, but you have to look up each individual trade agreement to find out what the preferential agreements are. It also identifies any special measures that might be on your products. So, as was mentioned earlier about moving foodstuffs, whether there's any health certificates that are required for the foodstuffs, if it's, you know, milk product or an animal product, whether there are SPS requirements, whether there are any which is phytosanitary and sanitary requirements, whether there are any special requirements because they're endangered species. If they're wood products, do you have to have any special treatment on packaging or something like that? But ultimately also it shows whether there's any specific controls on the type of product you're moving. So is your product deemed dual use? So would you need an export license putting it into a particular market? Or is it a military item where you are going to need a license to move it? And as I say, I've already mentioned international conventions such as CITES. Next slide, please. So the next area of concern is to understand your market, and this is probably one of the more difficult areas to understand. In particular, we've mentioned China, and as has been pointed out, China, instead of being one global, you know, one market for us, it's more like 7 or 8 separate markets, if not more. And in certain cases, you can have issues even in exporting to the same city into a different port. But you need to understand, is there a preferential trade agreement with that country? So you need to be able to look it up and find out what the rules are for origin of your product to be able to make use of that preferential trade agreement. You also need to understand what the tariff code is in that country. Now, it is the responsibility of the importer to do the correct classification on import as to what the commodity code is, but unfortunately not all importers understand completely what the product is. So quite often as an exporter you have to support them in understanding what the commodity code is. Also, do they allow you to make payments in country of duties and taxes, because you may not be able to import into that country under DDP, which is Incoterm delivered duty paid, because without being a registered importer in that country and having a physical presence in a lot of countries now, you are unable to make an import declaration. In particular in the EU, we've got an issue because now moving any goods to the EU, if you're, for instance, delivering B2C and your customer says, yeah, I want you to deliver the product, I don't want to have to do any import or anything like that, you don't know whether you're going to have to, if you're going to be able to pay the duties and taxes. If you haven't got a registered company in country, then you cannot pay import duties and taxes. So you have to get somebody else to do that on your behalf. You also have to understand whether there are sanctions and embargoes on the country in which you want to do business. And there's a couple of reasons for that. One, obviously, is it may actually be illegal for you to move your goods between the UK and that country. You need to look that up to find out, because it may well be that you would need an export license, or in fact that there's a complete embargo on you exporting those goods. Equally, it could be a sanction on the business or on the bank that they're using. So it might be that you are unable to get paid if you actually export goods to that country, because the bank they're using can't actually pay your bank because of restrictions. And then finally, one of the other big ones is specific safety marking and labelling requirements. Again, since we've moved out of the EU, everything's changed. In the UK now, the safety standards are UKCA, whereas previously it was CE marking. And all products now having to be sold, new products have to be classified in the UK against UKCA, and in the EU CE marking. Now, unfortunately, if you're selling into the EU and you're CE marked, you must also have a registered company within the office within the EU, which can act as your point of contact for that certification. So you would need to get hold of a particular agency to act on your behalf. Likewise, of course, in many other countries, there are labelling and marking requirements. The Saudi and the Middle East in particular, Saudi has got SASO, which means that you have to classify your goods against that, and quite often that becomes very expensive. May need a certificate of origin as well to support that. Likewise, China with CCC, and America with UL. Next slide, please. So one of the big things, customs invoice or commercial invoice, as it's got now, contains all the relevant information required for a forwarder or a customs broker to make an accurate customs declaration on your behalf. At least that's how it should be. So you need to make sure any goods that you're sending, that you have a clear customs invoice or commercial invoice available with it when you go to whoever your fast parcel operator or forwarder is, so that they've got all the right information. That should include origin, should include tariffs, should include the proper value as well, so they can make all the right also indications as to any specific licenses that may be required to move those goods. Next slide, please. So key information, just a reminder. First one, tariff code. And an important one here is clear description of the product. So ideally, the product should be as clear as and as close as possible to the tariff code. In most cases, the tariff code is, I think it's about 90% of tariffs. The commodity description is very close to what is on the tariff, but of course that's not always the case. You've got engineers who design products and think they're going to give them wonderful names. A very simple example is to use brand names instead of a product name. I appreciate that we all know what a Hoover is, but in terms of export, that is a vacuum cleaner. And likewise, country of origin. If you want to make use of preferential trade agreements and pay less duties, then make sure you've got proof of origin. Value is very important, making sure you classify your goods value appropriately. Bear in mind that the value for customs purposes is different for value if you're calculating your origin. For customs purposes, it's the ex-works value plus the cost of insurance, plus the cost of packing, plus the cost of shipping. You then got export classification if controlled, and in particular, if they are controlled, dual use or military, then you're going to have an export license requirement. Equally, you've got other classifications that you might need, specifically if you've got CITES goods or goods which are subject to sanitary or phytosanitary controls. You might need specific plant certificates or health certificates to support the movement of those goods. As I've already mentioned, safety marking and product labeling. But the big one, it's the one that a lot of people forget, is Incoterms. If people are using Incoterms, understand the implications. If we use the two extremes, ex-works is the one where the biggest risk is placed on the buyer. You are effectively saying to the buyer, come here and collect your goods from my shop. But under DDP, the buyer is effectively saying, come here and deliver those goods into my hand, and I don't want to have to pay any duties and taxes. So, and everything in between. So you need to be aware of all the issues of moving your goods. Next slide, please. So another biggie is arranging transportation for your goods. Most people will work with a freight forwarder or a fast parcel operator in moving their goods. All right, we have a lot of the larger companies are their own freight forwarders as well, but you need to understand who you're working with and what markets they work. So do your homework. Do go online, look at what people are saying about the various fast parcel operators, look at their websites, and look at the markets they operate in. You know, I can't honestly tell you that there's one that is any better than the other, and they all have better reputation in certain markets than others. But you have to do your homework. Understand whether they're reliable, and in particular, if they understand your particular needs. I'll use an example of a company I used to work for. We used an international freight forwarder, but one of the main things we needed them to understand is our particular product was 7.5 tons. It was oversized cargo, and it had to go in special packaging, which meant it couldn't be loaded into containers, and therefore was difficult when placing it onto ships, and container ships particularly, because it took up room that would normally have used containers. And if you take an oversized cargo to the port, what's going to get preference? A nice container where you can fit 4 or 5 containers into a space where you can only put 1 package. There were a couple of occasions when our goods got left at the side of the dock and missed the ship because they wanted to put more stuff onto the ship. Equally, oversized cargo quite often has to go on a large vessel, so you need to understand the route you're going to take, particularly in somewhere like China. China does have a deep water port, but you need to understand which one it is, and if you're delivering to that, fine, but if not, then we've had occasions where we had to deliver to Hong Kong and transfer to a smaller vessel to get the goods into the port we needed it to, and then to the final destination. Cost effectiveness, that's another one. Cheapest isn't always the most cost effective. Look at all the extras that they offer you. In particular, if they're going to act on your behalf, and because they have offices in other countries, so they can do imports on your behalf in other countries, and you know, so you can deliver B2C DDP, and the fast parcel operator or freight forwarder will do the import clearance and pay all the duties and taxes. Bear in mind, of course, they will charge you for that an extra. Also bear in mind, if you have not got a registered company in the country, you cannot claim back the VAT and duty. So you need to understand if your freight forwarder can support you with those declarations. And in that case, they would be acting as the importer of record in country where you're going to be doing business. Building that relationship with the freight forwarder is really important, and including the fast parcel operators. Unfortunately, some of the fast parcel operators, particularly over the last year, of course, where we've had a huge boom in the use of fast parcel operators and the movement of goods, despite what people are saying about Brexit and other bits and pieces, the added complication of moving goods into Europe has made the fast parcel operators' life a lot more difficult. And so they're not quite as quick to come back to you and support you as you would like. Doesn't mean you shouldn't contact them when there's an issue. They will get back to you, but just bear in mind, some cases it's going to be a little bit slower than it used to be. Thank you. I think that's the end of my slides. Just check the next slide before we...
I think it is, Hamish. Well done. Thank you very much. As a bit of a whistle-stop tour through customs and trade, but yeah, thank you very much for putting that into an e-commerce context. So yeah, we've got a few more minutes for questions now. We'll do a couple for Hamish and then hopefully a couple for the broader panel. Just a reminder, please keep your questions concise. The easier it is for me to read the questions, the more likely I am to read them, and try to keep it on topic as well. So we're not going to go too in depth into every single customs issue today, but we're going to try to keep it relatively focused on e-commerce. So first question, Hamish, has come from Sarah, who's talked about the reports that the e-commerce boom may be leading to warehouse capacity being increasingly hard to come by. What preparations could firms like Sarah's be making to ensure they're not caught out by this?
Yeah, that's a really good question, actually. You've probably seen in the news of late that there has been a real issue with customs warehousing running out of space. It's a big problem. The answer is planning, and more planning. So you need to manage your supply chain. Look at how you're getting your deliveries. Do just-in-time deliveries rather than getting stuff bought in-house or into a warehouse, you know, in plenty of advance time. invest in new technologies. So you know, new computer systems that are better able to cope with how you're managing your inventory and controlling your inventory, and have better stock management and ordering system. And the last one, I suppose, is investing in more warehouse space. Now, I realise that that is easier said than done, but it's one of the things that a lot of the big warehouse companies in particular have already started to look at, and they're investing quite a lot of money in increasing their warehouse capacity as they see this as a big problem. So yeah, I appreciate, thank you, that's a good question.
Thanks, Hamish. We've had a few people asking questions about VAT, and as Jack alluded to earlier, I mean, this is going to be an issue for the exporter to handle. It's not something done through a platform like Alibaba as such. So what do exporters need to be wary of in terms of their VAT obligations selling into different markets from the UK?
Yeah, again, a really good question, thank you. So, and I suppose it depends on the type of product you've got, but one of the big things is obviously your purchase contract. Make sure you've got the terms and conditions clearly stated in your purchase contract, in particular Incoterms. And as I pointed out earlier, delivery duty paid means that you're going to be responsible for paying duties and taxes on the importing country, which you cannot do if you are not registered in that country. Equally, X Works, where they're coming to pick up the product, yes, if you know they're exporting it, you can zero rate it for tax, for VAT, etc. But you must make sure that they declare it properly at export. Then you also, if you don't do that and you want to be able to claim back the VAT because you know it's been exported, you need to ensure that you've got proof of export. So you've got to make sure if you are exporting those goods X work, so preferably move on to FCA or something like that, where you can be assured that you're going to get proof of export from your customer. Research customs regulations for the current country you're selling into. What are the rules regarding importer records? So not all of them require that you have registered status, or that you, there are some, well, I'll say there were some loopholes that helped you, but they have been closed up recently. Netherlands used to have a huge area where you can make it a lot easier, but they've got much more strict on it moving in recent times. So basically, where possible, you need a physical presence in country to be able to pay import duties and taxes. The other thing, of course, is make your duty deferment account is another thing. Make use of a duty deferment account. Means you can defer payment to the end of the month, and set the level of insurance, etc., and the level of your duty become appropriately, because unfortunately, especially as we've realised of late, a lot of people have realised that, you know, they've set up their duty deferment account, set up the insurance to support it, and suddenly realise that they've gone way over it before they even get past the first 3 months. So yeah, keep on top of it. Again, it comes down to planning.
It should be noted that the IOE does do webinars and training courses on VAT. So if you do need more information, do have a look at the site. We'll go into the next slide. You'll see we're into very much the last few questions. Just one follow-up question on VAT though, Hamish, is from Sylvia. Can you explain how triangulation works? Who should be paying VAT if there's a company in the middle that arranges import of the goods from their supplier directly to their buyer?
Okay, so triangulation as we knew it, particularly in Europe, doesn't exist anymore because of the nature of what's happened. But the VAT is the responsibility of the person that's exporting the goods, the physical exporting of the goods. So it doesn't really matter who the import, you know, is it middleman or so import VAT is the responsibility of the importer of record, and claiming VAT for goods that you're exporting. Obviously, it's your responsibility to make sure you charge VAT for goods that are under £135. It has to be done at the point of export. For goods that are higher than that, if you're charging VAT and obviously they want to claim it back, it is down to the person that's selling the goods. And yes, if you've got an intermediary that's acting on your behalf, you've got to make sure that whatever the agreement is with them, that they make sure that all VAT. So triangulation, as we sort of used to know it, doesn't really exist anymore. Yeah, I'm not a VAT expert by any stretch, and as William has already pointed out, we do have seminars and training on VAT, so we do have people who are much more experienced on VAT than I am, so I'm sorry if I can't give you any more than that. Thank you.
No, always, Hamish. Honesty, the best thing, but I think you've provided a great start there. And as you say, there's more information on the site. We have time for one more question from Tanya, and it would be for, I think, Jack in the first instance, but then maybe Hamish may come in on this. Tanya's asked, are the buyers cross-checked by Alibaba and are they 100% genuine? So is there a due diligence part aspect on Alibaba, or is it something again the trader has to do themselves?
So we do two checks. We do check the buyers, whether they're genuine buyers, so we can see their behavior on the platform. And so if they're going to spam the platform with all kinds of requests, we notice. And the sellers are also they need to, before they register, they need to comply with the registration check we do before they can open the web shop. So we try to get to keep the platform pure.
Fantastic. And Hamish, you'd advise anyway, due diligence always worthwhile doing on any buyer.
Absolutely, and it does depend on the type of products you've got and where you're selling them to. But yeah, from two areas, obviously you've got due diligence checks from an export compliance perspective, in particular from with respect to sanctions, embargoes, but also from anti-bribery compliance. So you want to make sure that the people you're selling to haven't breached regulations. So it would normally, I would recommend that you try and either look at the sanctions, embargoes on countries and businesses from the government website, or invest in access to a due diligence screening tool where you can screen individuals and businesses to see whether they're proper entities. Also do search on the internet by name and businesses and other bits and pieces. There's a lot of checks you can do, and it can be really expensive, particularly if you're dealing with some of the countries that are on the what we call the red list for anti-bribery compliance and breaches of controls, because often you do a search in English and unfortunately it doesn't do a search in the country where you wanted to sell the goods to, because it's not in the right language, so you have to pay somebody else to do that search for you. But yeah, if you've got an expensive technology or something like that that you're selling, very worthwhile doing proper checks.
Thanks, Hamish. Thank you, Jack. Just back to VAT quickly, our VAT experts actually on the line, or one of our VAT experts, Dilip, has said traders need to be mindful of the place of supply in triangulation shipments. So if the place of supply is within the EU, then EU VAT rules apply. And so if you want more of Dilip's wisdom, by all means look at our VAT training courses. But we have run out of time, I'm afraid. So thank you once again to Jack, Charles, and Hamish for your time today with the presentations and answers. We hope everyone has found that useful. We'll leave this slide with Jack and Charles' emails open for a minute or so, just in case you want to contact them with any further queries. But just a reminder that we will also be sending everyone a recording of today's webinar along with a copy of the slides that will be with you within the next 24 hours. Please do get in touch if for any reason this email doesn't come through to your main inbox. But as you leave, please do let us know what you thought of today's webinar and any suggestions for topics on future webinars by completing the exit survey. And for now, thank you for joining us, and I hope you have a great rest of the day. Goodbye, everyone. Thank you.
Thank you. Goodbye.
Thank you.
Thank you.